Redux is an adjective meaning brought back or bringing back. Welcome to Makeshift Stories Redux, selected tales, re-edited and re-recorded from the last 12 years of the podcast. Relax, let the world go by, and open your imagination as we drop back to December 14th, 2014, to listen to Shortwave, read by Mitchell 2. Audio post-production by Matthew Erdman. July 9th, 11:30 p.m., 1956. Lynn read aloud from the yellowed scrap of paper which had fallen off the shoebox she was carrying from the overflowing bedroom closet to the 1970s wood-grained kitchen table. At one time, the note had been taped to the lid, but the adhesive, long since dried out, no longer held it to the cardboard. Lynn's sudden movement had, like a leaf on the roof of a quickly accelerating car, caused the paper to part company with the box and flutter to the floor, where she picked it up. I had been trying for a while to connect with a friend in California, she continued reading. Sending my call sign, NZ0WA. Hearing no response, I was about to pack up for the night, finally admitting that the atmospheric conditions were not going to allow me to bounce a signal that far. But something made me try one more time, so I gave my call sign again. Then I heard it, something faint at 28.6 megahertz. Hey there! A strange voice replied, barely audible through the static. It's good to speak to someone. Never thought I'd hear another human again. I returned the call saying, this is NZ0WA listening. I'm having trouble receiving. You seem to be fading. What is your call sign? A call what? The thin voice replied. I was about to tell whoever it was that it was illegal for unlicensed operators to be on that band, when the voice anxiously added through growing static. Back in 90 minutes or so, I hope. And the signal was gone. It was such an odd exchange that I've decided to write this down. Lynn finished reading, putting the scrap of brittle paper and the shoebox down on the cluttered table. I remember Uncle Alan being a bit quirky. It looks like he never threw anything out. She explained to Carrie, her friend, who had volunteered to drive out to the middle of nowhere and help her clean out the house. I didn't know him that well, Lynn added, fingering the shoebox's lid. He didn't get along with my father, so we hardly ever saw him. When the lawyer emailed me about the will, well, I was taken off guard. Once, when I was 12, he showed me his ham radio set. Uncle Alan let me listen to people from around the world. Some of his ham buddies were as far away as Japan and Australia. I told him it was kind of like an analog version of the internet, and it was awesome to know people had used it to connect. I think he liked that. Maybe that's why he put me in his will. Lynn cleared a stack of old ham radio magazines off a cracked vinyl kitchen chair, then slouched down into it, sighing. We've got so much to sort through before the estate sale. Thanks for coming, Carrie. No problem. You would have helped me too if I was in the same situation. Carrie picked up the scrap of brittle yellow notepaper, looked at it, then took the lid off the shoebox. Wow, it's full of notes, just like the one you read. Look. She noted, sliding the box over to Lynn, who peered in at the stacks of notepaper, which had, at one time, been bound together by thick elastic bands. The elastics had cracked and powdered with age. I'm tired. Let's take a break, Lynn suggested, walking over to the almond-colored fridge and pulling out 2 cans of pop. She made her way back to the table, tossed one can to Carrie, then opened her own, which foamed, spilling over the lid and into the shoebox. Instinctively, she pulled the papers out, then tried to wipe the sugary liquid off the top sheet on her jeans. Oh, well, I'll probably throw this stuff away anyway, she noted, then guiltily looked at the now stained notepaper. This looks like the second page. Want to hear what happened? Sure. Carrie stretched, then fell back into her chair. You never know. It might be interesting. Lynn flattened the soggy page on the tabletop and began to read. July 10th, 1 a.m., 1956. I stayed online, monitoring 28.6 megahertz, just to be sure the interloper wouldn't come back on the band. If he did, I wanted to figure out where he was coming from and get him off the air. I had almost fallen asleep when his staticky voice woke me. Are you still there? Please, talk to me. He pleaded, still not using a call sign. I figure I'll only be in range for about 5 to 10 minutes. Oh, am I supposed to say over or something? This is NZ0WA listening. Provide your call sign or get off this band. I need to warn you, I'm writing down everything you say. I'll send it to the FCC if you don't get off right now. The voice came back, this time apologetic. Please, I don't have a call sign. Write whatever you want, it doesn't matter. I moved the crank on my new directional VHF antenna, trying to locate the signal. But oddly, it appeared to be moving. This is NZ0WA. Are you on a truck or something? I radioed back and waited. Look, I bought the radio in a garage sale, just in case. I didn't intend to use it, but things aren't going the way I expected. I'll be out of range again soon. Please, just listen. This is NZ0WA. Explain. Are you moving? I'm a vet. I was in the Royal Canadian Engineers in '46. You were in the war? NZ0WA, over? I was in the engineering corps. What does that have to do with operating an unlicensed transmitter? I was beginning to get angry. Please, explain. NZ0WA, over. Everything, he said. Okay, I'm getting tired of this. Where are you broadcasting from? You have to get off this band. You don't have a license. NZ0WA, over. I don't know exactly where I am. I'm sort of everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Look, it's hard to explain. Where are you? That might help me figure it out. This is NZ0WA. You should be able to tell from my call sign. I don't know what a call sign is, right? Okay, North Dakota. I'm in North Dakota, I added, in disgust. I think I'm north of you, but I'm moving fast. I'll be out of range soon. Tell me about yourself. I'd like to know. I've been trying to reach someone for hours. I never thought I'd miss talking to another person so much. His signal was fading again. There was a touch of desperation in his voice, which, despite my reservations, made me feel compelled to reply. I'm an amateur radio operator and a vet, too. U.S. Navy in the Pacific. Where were you stationed? There was a static-filled pause, as if he were hesitant to reveal more about himself. Europe. Allied-occupied Germany at the end of the war. That's where this all started. His voice began to break up. Should be back in range in 90 minutes. I think. This is NZ0WA listening. Please repeat. I'm not receiving you clearly. Back when? That makes no sense. Please repeat. His signal completely disintegrated into static. NZ0WA listening. I repeated, but he was gone. There was something about this encounter that was different. I've had to chase my share of unlicensed amateur operators off the air. They switch bands as soon as they hear your call sign. It's a cat-and-mouse game. But none of them had ever announced when they would be back on the air. So, I set the alarm on my clock for 1 hour and 20 minutes, then settled back into my chair for a nap. July 10th, 2:30 a.m., 1956. The radio crackled, pulling me out of a dream. I had been floating in the Pacific, alone and exhausted, clinging to a piece of wreckage, a nightmare I hadn't had since the war. The luminous hands on the clock showed 2:30. The alarm hadn't gone off. I suddenly realized I had neglected to wind it. It had been 90 minutes. That seemed significant, but I didn't immediately understand why. In a surge of static, his voice broke through. "Calling the radio man, NZ0 something. Are you still there? Please, come in." I pulled myself up, trying to shake off the last vestiges of the dream, and turned my microphone on. "This is NZ0WA listening. Go ahead, unidentified radio source." "Good to hear from you again. I thought you might have given up and gone to sleep. What's your name?" "This is NZ0WA. My name is Alan. What's yours? Over?" "Jack. And Jack Manton." His signal was getting stronger. "This is NZ0WA. Why do you keep going out of range, Jack? Over?" "I'm only near you for a while." His response was cryptic, so I explained my situation to let him know what I needed to hear. "It's not a good night for shortwave signals. They aren't bouncing off the ionosphere, so I can't pick up anything over the edge of the horizon. You must be relatively close by. Is that right?" "That makes sense. I need to be over you to be picked up. But I don't have control of where I'm going, Alan. It's colder than I thought up here. I'm at the mercy of the elements." He paused, then corrected himself. Or, more precisely, Newton's laws. "This is NZ0WA. Are you trapped in some type of balloon? I've heard through a ham buddy that they're doing high-altitude testing, but I thought that was in New Mexico, not up here. Over?" It made sense this could be a secret high-altitude experiment gone wrong. A balloon caught in some weird jet stream, which was pushing it around in circles. But why would they send up someone without any radio experience? Or had the pilot been injured and was unconscious? I might be talking to a passenger, maybe a scientist. "This is NZ0WA. Was there an accident? Is your pilot unconscious? Who should I call to help you? Over?" "No accident," Jack responded, then added mysteriously. "I think everything is going according to plan, but I just don't know what the plan is." "You're not making sense, Jack. Please explain. NZ0WA, over." I'm in space, Alan. Going around the world every 90 minutes. I wish you could see it. The night side is beautiful. The town and city lights are like glowing spider webs. I've just passed over a small city, and I think I can make out the Great Lakes coming up on the horizon. The moon is only a thin crescent tonight, so it's very dark. Hard to tell exact details. I think I passed over you a few minutes ago, heading east. Your signal is fading now. "This is NZ0WA. Please repeat. You claim to be in space orbiting the Earth? How long have you been there, over?" There was a burst of static. Then his voice came back. "I launched at dawn from my farm near Oxbow, Saskatchewan, just north of the U.S. border. That was almost 2 days ago. The gauges say I've got air for another day, but the batteries aren't working that well. I'll be out of power long before then." "This is NZ0WA. Your signal is starting to break up again. What are you saying is hard to believe. How'd you get up there? I was stationed in a small town in Germany at the end of the war, part of the occupation forces. Once, we had to build a temporary bridge to get our trucks across a river. As punishment for breaking curfew the night before, I was assigned to dig a trench by myself. While I was working, I found an aluminum tube, about 2 feet long and 4 inches in diameter, with lids on both ends which screwed off. I had been looking for a souvenir to take home, so I took one end off and looked in. The tube was full of rolled-up papers. I didn't look at them very carefully. Instead, I closed the container and slid it into my kit bag before anyone caught me. I was on the ship home a couple months later, before I discovered what the papers were. It turned out I had stumbled on the top secret designs for a rocket that could carry a person. It was an advanced V2, probably intended as an orbital spy craft. My hands are getting numb, Alan. I can't work the radio anymore. I've got to put my gloves on. I've turned the heater down as much as possible to conserve the batteries. Guess I should have bought new ones instead of pulling them from my tractor. Talk to you in 90. With that, the signal broke apart into static again. July 10th, 4 a.m., 1956. Jack's signal has come back, on time, but much weaker than before. This is NZ0WA, I began, before Jack cut me off. Alan, drop the formal stuff and just listen. The power is running out. I've only got enough for maybe another orbit or two. And it's getting really cold, worse than a prairie winter. I'm trying not to lick any of the gear, so my tongue won't get frozen to it. We're warned about that growing up, but the gyroscope is awfully tempting. He laughed feebly. There's a lot I want to tell you. Okay, Jack. I'm listening and receiving you clearly. I radioed. Then Jack continued with his story. After the war, I didn't really have much to come back to. No family, no real friends. I was always a bit of a loner, so I bought a farm in the middle of nowhere no one wanted and studied the plans. I was a machinist before the war. I love the beauty of a well-made machine. I suppose, in some ways, I like them more than people. I can figure out how an engine works, but people have always been a mystery to me. Anyway, I could read the blueprints and machine the parts myself, and the design was elegant. The rocket became my obsession. I converted the barn into a machine shop and one of the grain silos into an assembly room and launch pad. In the summer, I farmed, and in the winter, I worked on the rocket. It took 10 years to build from parts I made or bought at surplus stores. You never once thought about turning the plans over to the government or a university or something? I asked, pretty certain I already knew the answer. If it had been me and I had found the designs for a super radio, would I have given them up? I'm not sure. I didn't know what they would do to me if the government found out I had kept the plans. I think I might have been thrown in prison. With all the paranoia about the Soviets these days, who knows? Anyway, by the time I was discharged, well, I was too far down the path to turn back. Building the rocket gave me a reason to put the war behind and move on. And if it can't get you down? I asked. Was it worth it? At this point, I still suspected the whole thing might be an elaborate prank. More distorted now, Jack replied. The plans were very detailed, but the notes about the flight and descent were missing. They automated the whole design, and I've implemented the plans precisely. There are gyros and timing mechanisms, which I think are the guidance system. It's all worked up to now. Really, I'm just the payload. along for the ride. The problem is, I don't know how long the flight is supposed to take. But I don't really care. I'm the first person to get to space, and I built the rocket to get here myself. And the view, it's such a fantastic view from up here. He paused for a few seconds, considering what to say next. Yes, it's worthwhile. I've worked to get here for 10 years, but never thought beyond this point. I wasn't going to tell anyone. Just doing it was going to be enough for me. But once I got up here, my project was complete, and I suddenly felt purposeless and so utterly alone. I just needed to talk to someone. One person, that's all, not the whole world. What would I say to the world anyway? Hey, I'm a criminal who lifted a set of top-secret plans and built a ballistic missile in my barn. They'd either come after me or label me insane. I've reached my goal, Alan. I don't have another. Wait, something is happening. The chronometers, they're... A sudden surge of interference obscured his next words. Jack, you're fading. What are your chronometers doing? Counting. I lost his signal. July 10th, 5:30 a.m., 1956. It's approaching time Jack's rocket should be coming over the horizon. His batteries were so low on his last orbit that I'm not sure I will be able to pick him up again. I have to admit, I'm still having trouble believing one person could build a space rocket, or that such a thing was ever planned in the 1940s, or even possible now. And if any of that was true, why would someone have launched themselves into space without knowing if they could get back? I need some tangible proof that I can see with my own eyes. I'm turning the volume up on the receiver as high as it will go so I can hear it outside. July 10th, 5:35 a.m., approximately. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east when I stepped out into the backyard. I took a guess and looked to the northwest. At first, I only saw a few constellations starting to fade into the dawn. Then, I noticed a dull star that was moving west to east, getting brighter as time progressed. It was too slow to be a meteor, and by the time it had reached overhead, it had grown a tail of fire that had streaked past and out of sight, leaving a contrail of sooty, white smoke disappearing into the glare of the pre-dawn sky. There was a quick surge of static and odd, garbled sounds from the radio. Then the speaker went silent. Suddenly, I felt immensely tired and needed to sleep. I left my receiver on, tuned to 28.6 MHz band just in case. Then, tried to lay down on an old bedroll I kept in the radio room. July 11th, 10 p.m. I got neither sleep nor another contact. It's around 10 now, and, by my calculations, if Jack's still up there, I should be able to see him. I'm going out to look. July 11th, 10:35 p.m. I scanned the northwest sky, but this time all the stars stayed fixed in the rapidly fading twilight. I waited for 45 minutes just in case, but nothing moved. I thought about that last burst of static again, and finally connected the broken words. I think Jack was trying to tell me he would get his ham radio operator's license if he made it back. August 30th, 1956. I've just arrived back from a car trip to Oxbow. It wasn't as far as I thought, only a 4-hour drive, just over the border into Canada, virtually straight north from my house outside of Bismarck. After the incident, I watched the newspapers for a month, looking for reports of shooting stars or a person who claimed to have been in outer space. But By the middle of August, the only thing I found was a story on UFOs buzzing an airbase in England in the Tribune's back pages. I had a week of unused holidays, so I found out where Oxbow was, drove up there, and spent a couple of days asking about Jack. But no one had heard of him. Finally, a gas jockey who filled my tank told me about a farmhouse on the edge of the county that had burned down in July. No one knew the name of the owner. It was the only clue I had dug up, so I decided to drive out. It took almost an hour and a half on empty, dusty gravel back roads to get there. No one passed me in either direction on the entire trip. The place had to be the most isolated farm I had ever been to. I saw the windbreak first over the neglected fields, and rising behind the half-dead trees was the skeletal remains of a grain silo. I drove up and parked by a closed gate. Beyond, all the farm buildings had been burned to the ground. A circle of charred grass appeared to be centered on the remains of the grain silo. It extended out for over 250 feet in every direction. The trees in the windbreak closest to the silo had been scorched on one side, speaking to the fire's intensity and brevity. However brief the conflagration had been, its destruction was utter and thorough. In the charred carnage, there was the skeleton of a tractor and an older model car, but that's all I found. Was it the launch site and the fire caused by Jack's rocket? Wouldn't believing that be an attempt to bend the facts to fit the story? Anything could have caused the fire, and probably did. Occam's razor, I've told myself. But still, I guess I'll never know for sure. I've documented these events, so I will not forget the details. But I have decided not to tell anyone. Like Jack, I've always been the odd one out. And without tangible proof, who would believe me anyway? Lynn put the last page down on the table and leaned back into her seat, thinking. I was hoping to find out a bit more about my uncle, but I didn't expect anything like this. What do you think, Carrie? I don't know. Maybe it's just a story, and your uncle had secret ambitions to be a writer. But we haven't found any other notes or writing, Lynn noted. The house is full of ham radio stuff, nothing else. Looks like that's all that interested him, except for this. Lynn nodded at the shoebox, carefully putting the brittle pages back into it. If it happened, you'd think there'd be some other evidence. Wasn't NORAD around then? You'd think they would have caught the launch on radar or something. Maybe they just kept it a secret, embarrassed that some guy on a farm had beat everyone into space in a DIY rocket. Carrie added, picking up a 40-year-old ham radio magazine and reading its cover. Building your own microwave frequency meter. It seems a bit of a leap from this type of stuff to fabricating stories about spacemen. Lynn thoughtfully looked at the box, then set it aside with the few things she was keeping. Maybe it was my uncle's version of Orson Welles' broadcast of the War of the Worlds for ham radio. We still have a couple more rooms to go through. Maybe we'll find something else. Lynn observed, hopefully. Lynn and Carrie spent the rest of the afternoon opening enough boxes to fill a small warehouse, finding everything except more handwritten notes. With time running out, they were forced to give up and return to picking items for the sale and tagging the rest for the dumpster. At the end of the day, Lynn carefully stowed the shoebox in the trunk of her car, along with the other family history items she had promised her mother she'd keep. Then, promptly forgot about them. 2 weeks later, Lynn was online, checking her messages, when she noticed a query from her aunt about some family photos she had asked Lynn to save. Lynn retrieved the box and other items from the trunk of her car, found the pictures, and was about to scan them for her aunt when she thought about the story again. On an impulse, Lynn pulled out the pile of papers and began studying all the yellowed pages. Next, she found a ham radio history site, joined the blog, and posted scans of her uncle's notes. She checked the comments for her post each day for 2 weeks, hoping someone could verify the account, but got nothing. Finally, deciding it was pointless, she lost interest. "Did you ever find out anything more about your uncle's story?" Carrie asked as they sipped lattes on a cold and sunny Saturday morning at their favorite coffee shop. "No. I tried posting the story to a ham radio website and asked if anyone had ever heard about the incident. A few people liked the story, but that's all. So, I guess it was my uncle's first and last effort at writing fiction." "I was kind of hoping," Carrie said, looking up from her drink to watch a group of underdressed kids trying to pretend that they were not freezing in the north wind outside. Lynn's phone chimed. "Sorry, it's my message tone," she apologized, then pulled the phone from her coat and thumbed it on. "I'll change it to silent," she started to say, then stared at the small screen. "Unbelievable. He's got to be in his 90s. Look!" Lynn laughed, then handed the phone to her friend. Carrie scanned the short message. "Sorry to hear about your uncle. I couldn't figure out how to contact him after I got back. There's a lot of Allens in North Dakota. But I kept my promise and got my operator license. I just wanted someone in his family to know. JM." Redux is a Makeshift Stories production. Makeshift Stories is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. To listen to other great APN podcasts, such as the award-winning Putting It Together podcast with host Kyle Marshall, please head over to albertapodcastnetwork.com. This episode was brought to you by Park Power, a provider of electricity and natural gas in Alberta that offers low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities. Shopping local is very important to Park Power's owner, Chris Kozowski, and we love local here at the Alberta Podcast Network, so it's a great fit. Learn more at parkpower.ca. This episode was also brought to you by ATB Financial. I want to talk to you about a new initiative from our friends at ATB called ATB Goodness Grows. Hashtag ATB Goodness Grows is an initiative that motivates Albertans to bring joyful moments to others. We're all adjusting to being disconnected from the places, people, and experiences we love. So, making someone laugh or bringing a smile to their day has never been more needed or more powerful. From live streams connecting business owners to new and fun ways to celebrate things like Father's Day, ATB hopes to inspire Albertans to keep the goodness growing. To find out more or to get involved, visit atb.com/COVID-19/community. Makeshift Stories is released twice a month around the 1st and the 15th. This month's story was written by Alan V. Hare and read by Mitchell II. Audio post-production by Matthew Erdman. Opening and closing themes were composed and recorded by David Hume. To find out more about David, head over to davidhume.me. If you'd like to connect with us, please send an email to makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. Links to both are in the show notes. You can help us out by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or any of your favorite podcast services. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution no derivative license, which means you are free to share our stories. Just remember to credit us and don't alter anything.